almost backwards of the way you wish.
Before we begin, take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear is not the fairy tale story fans believed for years. For decades, Vince Gill has been seen as country music's golden boy, the smooth voice, the humble smile, the loving husband. But behind the spotlight, behind the awards and standing ovations, something was quietly breaking. And now, Vince Gill has finally broken his silence. For years, fans assumed Vince's life was simple: music, love, success. But what happens when the camera turns off? What happens when the stage lights fade and the applause stops? That's where the real story begins, and it's darker than anyone expected. Vince Gill is known for emotional songs, but few people realized how close those lyrics were to his real pain. While the world saw him smiling at award shows, he was carrying something heavy. Something personal. Something he didn't talk about until now. His wife, a woman fans admired and respected, was fighting a private battle that few people understood. To the outside world, everything looked fine. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart. And Vince, he stayed quiet. Not because he didn't care, but because he was protecting someone he loved. But protection has a cost. In recent interviews and quiet moments of honesty, Vince finally opened up. He didn't give flashy headlines. He didn't chase attention. He simply told the truth, and the truth was heartbreaking. He revealed that his wife had been struggling deeply, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Not in a way people could see. Not in a way tabloids could photograph. But in a way that slowly changes everything inside a home. A slow collapse. A silent storm. Vince admitted there were nights he couldn't sleep. Days he couldn't write. Songs he couldn't finish. Because when the person you love is hurting, you feel it too. And when you're famous, you're not allowed to fall apart in public. Fans noticed something was off. His voice sounded different. His energy changed. But no one knew why. Until now. What he finally shared shocked everyone. He spoke about fear. About helplessness. About watching someone you love lose pieces of themselves. And how he had to stay strong, not as a star, but as a husband. This wasn't about drama for clicks. This was about real pain. And the hardest part? He said the worst moments were the ones no one saw. The quiet ones. The moments in the dark. The moments where he wondered if love alone was enough to save someone. And that's when the story truly begins. Because what happened next would change Vince Gill forever. At the peak of Vince Gill's career, everything looked perfect. Sold-out tours. Awards on every shelf. Fans cheering his name. But while the world celebrated Vince the superstar, his personal life was quietly slipping into chaos. And this is where the story takes a turn no one expected. Behind the scenes, Vince was facing something far more powerful than any stage pressure: the slow, painful reality of watching his wife struggle. He later admitted that fame didn't protect them. In fact, it made things harder. Because when you're famous, people expect you to always be okay. They expect smiles, not silence. And the silence? That's where the real damage was happening. Vince described how the house that once felt full of laughter started to feel heavy. Conversations became short. Moods shifted. The warmth between them faded into worry. And no matter how many songs he wrote or shows he played, he couldn't fix what was breaking at home. He said there were moments when he would come back from tour, expecting comfort, only to walk into emotional distance. His wife wasn't the same person he fell in love with, not because she didn't care, but because something inside her was changing. That's when the fear started. Vince admitted he began to realize this wasn't just stress. This wasn't just a bad phase. This was something deeper. Something serious. Something that could destroy a marriage if left unspoken. But here's the twist: he didn't talk about it. Why? Because he didn't want to turn her pain into public entertainment. He didn't want headlines. He didn't want rumors. He wanted to protect her dignity. And that choice nearly broke him. Instead of speaking out, Vince buried himself in work. More tours. More songs. more time away. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to help. Music became his escape. The stage became the only place he could breathe. Fans started noticing. His performances felt different. More emotional. More intense. Like he was singing from a wound that wouldn't heal. And then, the rumors started. People whispered about trouble in the marriage. Distance. Coldness. Something. Off. But Vince stayed silent. He let people talk. He let stories grow. Because the truth was too personal to share. He later said something powerful. When someone you love is falling apart, you don't run to the world, you run to them. But what if they don't know how to be reached? That's the part no one talks about. He tried therapy. Conversations. Long nights of listening. But nothing was simple. His wife wasn't just struggling, she was fighting herself. And Vince was fighting alongside her, without armor, without instructions. And then came the moment that changed everything. One night, after another argument that ended in silence instead of resolution, Vince realized something terrifying. Love wasn't enough anymore. Not without honesty. Not without facing the truth. That's when he made the hardest decision of his life. And what he chose next would shock fans around the world. What fans saw was Vince Gill the legend. What they didn't see was Vince Gill the exhausted husband. Every smile on stage was hiding a storm inside his home, and every encore was followed by silence behind closed doors. Vince later admitted that his life had split into two worlds. One full of light, music, and applause. The other full of worry, tension, and emotional distance. And the scariest part? No one warned him how lonely that double life could feel. Because when your public life is loud, your private pain becomes invisible. He started waking up early, not because he wanted to, but because sleep stopped coming easily. His mind was always racing. Was she okay? Was he doing enough? Was he losing her emotionally before losing her physically? His wife, once vibrant and full of joy, became withdrawn. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just gone in small pieces. And those pieces never seemed to come back. Vince said the hardest part wasn't the fights, it was the quiet. The silence at the dinner table. The empty look in her eyes. The way laughter slowly disappeared from their home. He tried to keep things normal for the outside world. He still showed up to events. Still signed autographs. Still told jokes in interviews. But inside, he was breaking. And the more he hid it, the heavier it got. He confessed that some of his most emotional songs were written during this time. Not for charts. Not for awards. But because he didn't know how else to release what he was feeling. Music became his only way to speak when words failed. There were nights he sat alone with a guitar, playing to an empty room. Not for fans. Not for money. Just to survive. He said something chilling. You don't realize how strong you've been until you finally admit how tired you are. And he was tired. Tired of pretending everything was okay. Tired of watching someone he loved disappear slowly. Tired of feeling powerless. But the spotlight doesn't care how you feel. It only cares how you look. So Vince kept going. He smiled. He waved. He sang. While his marriage quietly fell apart behind the scenes. And then, something happened that forced him to stop pretending. One morning, he realized he couldn't remember the last time his wife truly looked happy. Not polite. Not calm. But happy. That realization hit him harder than any bad review ever could. He knew something had to change. He knew silence was no longer protecting anyone. It was destroying them. So for the first time, Vince Gill stopped running from the truth. And what he discovered next would shake him to his core. When Vince Gill finally stepped back from pretending, the truth didn't come out in a neat, clean way. It came out in waves. Emotional waves. Confusing waves. And those waves didn't just hit him and his wife, they reached the fans too. Because when a celebrity who's known for stability starts changing, people notice. And once people notice, they start asking questions. Fans began to see cracks. Cancelled appearances. Softer interviews. A different tone in his voice. The man who once sounded calm and grounded now sounded heavy. Like every word carried weight. Then the rumors exploded. Some said there was trouble in the marriage. Others whispered about health issues. A few even accused him of hiding something scandalous. And in today's internet culture, silence always gets filled with speculation. Vince didn't defend himself. He didn't clap back. He didn't explain. Because the truth wasn't dramatic, it was painful. And pain doesn't make good headlines. But the world doesn't wait for gentle explanations. Tabloids ran stories. Social media spun theories. Fans argued in comment sections. Everyone had a version of the truth, except the people actually living it. And here's the part that broke Vince the most. People weren't just talking about him. They were talking about his wife. Judging her. Questioning her. Assuming things they had no right to assume. Vince later said that was the moment he felt the most anger he'd ever felt, not at the media, but at himself. Because his silence, meant to protect her, was now hurting her. And that's when everything flipped. He realized that staying quiet wasn't noble anymore. It was dangerous. The longer he said nothing, the more strangers wrote their own story about his marriage. So he made a decision. Not to expose his wife. Not to shame her. But to tell the truth carefully. With respect. With love. He began opening up in subtle ways. Not with explosive interviews, but with honest moments. He talked about emotional struggle. About how relationships can change. About how hard it is to love someone who's hurting and not know how to help them. Fans listened. And suddenly, the tone changed. Instead of judgment, there was sympathy. Instead of gossip, there was concern. But the biggest shock was still coming. Because the more Vince spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about marriage trouble. This was about survival. And what he revealed next would change how fans saw him, and his wife. Forever from the outside, Vince Gill's life looked like a dream. Private jets. Big homes. Legendary status in country music. But what most fans never realized is that luxury doesn't protect you from heartbreak. In fact, sometimes it hides it better. Because when your life looks perfect, no one believes you're falling apart. Yes, Vince and his wife lived in beautiful spaces. Yes, they had access to comfort, security, and everything money can buy. But behind those elegant doors, the emotional atmosphere was heavy. Quiet. Tense. Unsettled. Vince later said something that stunned people. You can be rich in things and completely bankrupt in peace. Their home had everything, except joy. The big rooms felt empty. The silence felt louder than any concert crowd. And the more success Vince had in his career, the more he felt like he was failing at the one role that mattered most to him, being a husband. And that failure hurt more than any lost award. He described how they stopped traveling together. Stopped laughing the way they used to. Stopped dreaming out loud. Instead of planning futures, they were surviving days. From the outside, people thought they were living the high life. From the inside, they were barely holding it together. Vince admitted that luxury became a distraction. A way to avoid facing what was really happening. Fancy dinners instead of deep conversations. Busy schedules instead of emotional honesty. And slowly, they drifted. Not with screaming fights. Not with cheating scandals. But with emotional distance. And emotional distance is the most dangerous kind. Because you don't notice it until you're already far apart. Vince said there were moments he would look at his wife and feel like he was standing next to a stranger. Not because she changed on purpose, but because pain had changed her. And he changed too. He became quieter. More guarded. More afraid to say the wrong thing. That fear built walls between them. Walls made of silence. Walls made of unspoken worry. Walls made of love that didn't know how to reach anymore. And behind those walls, the truth was waiting. One night, after another long day of pretending, Vince realized something painful. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing himself. And that realization pushed him toward the most honest moment of his life. Because what he would admit next would shock even his closest fans. By the time Vince Gill was ready to tell the truth, the internet had already written 100 fake versions of it. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some accused him of giving up. Others blamed his wife. And a few even suggested betrayal. But the real betrayal wasn't what people thought. The real betrayal was how mental and emotional pain gets ignored when it doesn't look dramatic enough. Vince finally spoke honestly, not to create headlines, but to correct them. He said there was no cheating. No secret lover. No hidden scandal. What there was illness. Struggle. And a slow emotional collapse that no one saw coming. He explained that his wife wasn't choosing to pull away, she was losing the ability to stay present. Her energy faded. Her spark dimmed. Her connection to the world weakened. And Vince? He felt helpless. Because you can't fix what you don't fully understand. He tried being patient. He tried being strong. He tried being silent. And none of it worked. He admitted something heartbreaking. I couldn't save her by loving her harder. That line shook fans. Because it proved this wasn't about effort. It was about reality. He talked about how people romanticize relationships, but they don't talk about what happens when one person becomes emotionally unreachable. When love turns into caretaking. When partnership turns into worry. That's where Vince was living. Not in romance. Not in drama. But in constant fear of losing the woman he married, piece by piece. And the truth was heavier than any rumor. When he finally revealed that his wife was battling deep emotional and mental struggles, the internet went quiet. Not with shock, but with respect. Fans stopped guessing. They started listening. They realized this wasn't a celebrity scandal. This was a human tragedy. And Vince wasn't a star anymore in their eyes. He was just a husband trying not to break. But the story still wasn't over. Because what came next was something no one saw coming. Something that would change everything. Just when fans thought they understood the full story, Vince Gill revealed something that completely shifted the meaning of everything that came before. This wasn't just about loss. It wasn't just about pain. It was about choice. Because sometimes, the hardest part isn't staying, it's knowing when to let go. Vince admitted that there came a moment when love had to change its shape. When holding on tightly was no longer helping, it was hurting both of them. He said he had to accept a truth no husband ever wants to face. You can't force someone back to who they used to be. You can only love who they are now. And who she was now was someone fighting a battle he couldn't fight for her. That's when he made the most painful decision of his life. Not to abandon her. Not to blame her. But to stop pretending everything was okay. He stepped back, emotionally, mentally, not because he stopped caring, but because he realized he was disappearing too. And that's the twist no one expected. Vince Gill chose honesty over image. Healing over headlines. Reality over fantasy. He stopped living the perfect celebrity husband story and started living the truth of a man trying to survive heartbreak with dignity. And when he finally spoke publicly about it, his voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Tired. Honest. He said something that left fans speechless. Sometimes love doesn't save the story, it saves the people. That line changed everything. It wasn't about a scandal. It wasn't about betrayal. It was about two people losing themselves in different ways. And choosing not to destroy each other in the process. And that's why this story matters. Because it's not just about Vince Gill. It's about every person who has loved someone they couldn't fix. Every person who stayed too long. Every person who left too late. Vince's silence wasn't weakness. It was protection. And when he finally broke it, he did it with respect, not revenge. He didn't expose. He explained. He didn't attack. He told the truth. And that's why fans listened. Because they could hear the pain. They could feel the honesty. And they could see the humanity behind the celebrity. This wasn't a shocking twist for drama. It was a real one for growth. And now, after everything he's been through, Vince Gill stands not just as a legend in music, but as a man who survived a quiet heartbreak and chose to tell the story with dignity. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you think differently about fame and relationships, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe for more deep, emotional stories about the lives behind the spotlight. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Because behind every famous face, there's a human story. And those stories deserve to be told.